Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Caitlin, and on this channel I upload all sorts of different types of videos relating to true crime, education and psychology related topics. So if that sounds like something you'd enjoy and you haven't already, then please do hit that subscribe button and don't forget to turn on your little notification bell so you know whenever I upload a new video. And welcome back to another day in my week of uploads. So if you haven't already seen, I am uploading a true crime case every single day of this week, so you'll have loads of content to look forward to from me. And for today's case, we're going to be discussing the disappearance of a pair of young girls known as the MILLBROOK twins. But before we get started, I'm just going to whiz through my usual disclaimer that I like to include at the start of all my videos, just letting you guys know that I'm not claiming to be an expert in this case or any of the other cases that I cover over on my channel. I'm simply relaying the information I'm able to find myself through research of certain sources on the internet, and because only certain sources are accessible to me, it means I may get things wrong, leave things out or mispronounce things. I apologise if I do any of those things. I'm not trying to cause anyone any harm or an injustice. I'm simply working with the information that I have available to me. So with all that being said, let's just go ahead and get started discussing the case of the MILLBROOK twins. Dannette and Jeanette MILLBROOK were a pair of fraternal twins born on the 2nd of April in the year of 1974 in Augusta in Georgia. The two girls came from a particularly large family, so they had a total of 8 siblings. Some of them were younger, some of them were older, and as well as their siblings, they were also known to spend a lot of time with and sort of be in a close vicinity with a number of their cousins, aunts, uncles, nieces, nephews. They were always surrounded by family, and they normally lived pretty close to them as well. The girls lived full-time with their mother, a woman named Mary Sturgis, who was more commonly known by her nickname Louise, and it's known that their father wasn't particularly present in their life. Despite this though, it is believed that the pair had a lot of contact with their grandparents on their paternal side, and they had an all-round good relationship with this side of the family. And when the girls' case was taking place, they were just 15 years old and appeared to be just normal teenagers. In their early life, they've both experienced some minor health problems, including both of them actually having operations for a hernia, and Dannette in particular was on some medication to treat some seizures that she'd been having. And in some sources I read too, it stated that Dannette had also walked slightly bow-legged. All in all, the twins were known to be very nice girls, if not maybe a little bit quieter than the other kids their age, but as is the case with a lot of sets of twins, one of the sisters was sort of deemed as being slightly more dominant and outgoing than the other one. And in this case, the more dominant twin was Dannette, who was sort of viewed as Jeanette's protector. There was one incident in particular that was known to have really shown their difference in natures that was repeatedly referred to in a lot of sources, so I thought I'd just sort of brush through this to kind of give you an understanding of what the two girls were like. So at one point in time, Dannette was found to be really having a hard time in school, and she ended up being enrolled in another local school that specialised in providing the students with additional academic support. And because of this move to a different school, Dannette did end up having to be held back a grade. And rather than getting the bus with her twin sister like she normally would, she had to start going to a different bus stop every morning to get a slightly different bus than her sister. On one particular day, there was a local girl who had seen Jeanette alone at the bus stop. And like I said, Jeanette was seemingly the more passive twin. So she was sat alone at the bus stop, and this girl had decided to begin teasing her since she didn't have her confident sister to support her. And later on, when Dannette had learned of the torment that her twin had suffered at the hands of this other local girl, she decided to come up with a plan to confront her. And so the following morning, Dannette headed down to her old bus stop with her sister and confronted the girl, which resulted in the pair getting into sort of a scuffle. The fight was only broken up when a local police officer had happened to drive past the scene, where the girls were surrounded by this large group of local kids, all sort of bearing witness to this altercation. The officer had taken down the names of the two girls involved in the fight, and they hadn't really come into any form of trouble because of it. And the MILLBROOK twins' case takes place on the 18th of March in the year of 1990. That morning, the girls had gone to church with their mother, brothers and sisters, something that was very typical of the family on a Sunday. While they were at church, the pastor had given their mother, Louise, a small amount of money to treat the children to lunch with. And when the family had arrived home, the twins had been given the money by their mother, who had asked them to go and pick up some food at Church's Chicken, which wasn't located very far from their home. The girls hadn't been out long, and then they returned back with the food. But upon their return, they had mentioned to their mother briefly that they had noticed a man in a white van that had appeared to have been following them. Their mother hadn't initially thought much of it, especially considering the number of people in the household that she was sort of already likely dealing with, and also because of the fact that the girls had sort of only mentioned it in like a passing comment. And at this point, the family had only been in this particular house of theirs for a few months, and so they were all still adjusting to the new area and the new neighbours and local residents. Following this move, the twins had to move schools since they moved away from the school district that they were already in, and so this meant that they both started attending Lucy Laney High School. And this high school in particular didn't have school buses that the girls could catch with other students every morning, and so instead they had to start getting used to making the journey to school on public buses. And on that Sunday, the girls had spoken to their mother about needing money for the bus fares for the upcoming week, since unlike school buses, the pair would have to pay for their fares. Because of how complicated the journey to school was for them, the girls had planned on changing schools following the end of the semester. The twins' mother had suggested to the pair that they ring up their godfather, a man named Ted, who had been a long-term friend of the family, and ask him for some money for the bus fares. And Ted lived at that time in the place where the family had just moved from. It was a place known as Bethlehem. So the girls called up Ted and he'd offered to give them $20 in cash for the week, which not only covered their bus fares but also gave them a little bit of extra money to buy some snacks during the week. At approximately 3 p.m. on that Sunday, Dannette and Jeanette left their home and headed in the direction of Ted's house. Dannette had left the house wearing a white t-shirt with Mickey Mouse on it, a pair of white jeans and black coloured trainers. Jeanette hadn't changed out of her church clothes, and so she was wearing a white turtleneck, a blue jumper, beige skirt, tights and a pair of trainers. Before they'd left the home, their 12-year-old sister Shanta had asked if she could go with the girls on their walk, which would be about 2 miles each way, but the girls had told her that she couldn't go with them. And the twins knew that they would have to be back at their own home before dinner time and before it got dark outside, which it usually did so around that time of the year at around 7 p.m. But after the girls left their home, that would be the last time their family would ever see Dannette and Jeanette. It's known that the pair had arrived at Ted's house not long after they had left their own, and he recalled the pair seeming extremely normal and nothing was out of the ordinary. The girls stayed at his house for a short while before collecting their money and then leaving once again. And the girls then decided that while they were in the area where they used to live, they would stop in at their cousin Juanita's house since it was just a block away from Ted's. After speaking for a short while, they asked Juanita if she would be allowed to walk to their home with them, but her mother had refused to let her go since it was already starting to get dark outside. The girls then left this home, but before heading straight for their own home, they decided to stop in at their older sister's house. Their older sister had not long had a baby, and so they wanted to pop in and visit their relatives while they were in the area. But something that was possibly slightly unusual had been that the girls had also asked this sister if she would walk back to their home with them. And in hindsight, their family had considered the possibility of this maybe being an indication of the girls having been unsettled by something or someone while they'd been walking out and about that day. But since their sister had the baby to take care of that evening, she told them that she couldn't go with them. When the twins had realised that the sun was starting to set, they realised that they needed to start their journey back to their own home before it got too dark. While on their walk home, they decided to stop off at the Pump and Shop store located on the corner of MLK and 12th Streets. The woman working in the convenience store, her name was Gloria, and she was a family friend of the girls, so when the girls came in, she recognised them instantly. She claimed she could remember the girls coming into the store, buying some crisps and some drinks using the excess cash that they'd been given to cover their week's bus fares, and then, like that, they left. And this would be the last known sighting of Dannette and Jeanette MILLBROOK. As the hours passed and it had gotten darker and darker outside, the twins' mother became concerned when there had been no sign of the girls. She'd already suspected that something was gravely wrong since the girls were always so well behaved and they always came home on time, and so she attempted to call the Richmond County Sheriff's Office to report the pair as missing. But when she'd managed to get through to an officer, she was informed that she had to wait at least 24 hours before filing an official missing persons report. And when she realised that she wasn't going to get any help from the sheriff's office, she decided to head out herself and look for the 15-year-olds. She took 12-year-old Shanta with her, and they drove in the direction of where they believed the girls would have walked to and from Ted's house. They ended up finding nothing to suggest where the girls were, and by the next day there still remained no sign of the pair. That Monday evening, the day after the pair were last seen, Louise didn't hesitate in filing a missing persons report for each of her daughters. A few days later, when there remained no sign of the girls, a detective had visited their home in order to sort of start piecing together some statements from the family members of when they'd last been seen. And then following this point, the case was officially taken over by a juvenile investigator who continued to sort of be the lead in the investigation and the search for the girls in the following few months. In retrospect, a lot of people have since criticised each of the investigators and members of law enforcement involved in the search for the twins because it appeared to many that they sort of had not taken the case particularly seriously. As it sadly is the case with a lot of disappearances, it appeared that the authorities had maintained their own assumptions that the pair had simply been runaways for a huge portion of the search. Following the case being taken over by the juvenile investigator, the family of the girls were told that they had to trust him entirely while searching for Dannette and Jeanette, and they couldn't really do much more. And since there was literally little else they could do, this is exactly what they did. They trusted him. But as months passed, nothing new seemed to crop up in the investigation, and they didn't appear to have any leads or any evidence that they were planning on working with. There had also been many mistakes made in the reports created by the investigators, including them writing down the wrong birth date of the twins, misspelling their surname, and even getting Dannette's middle name wrong completely. And when the twins' journey home that day was recorded, the authorities had written down an entirely different road than the one that they had actually passed down, meaning that their timeline and their route was completely wrong in the police record. And because these details in the original police reports were incorrect, it meant that a lot of the following news reports and follow-up investigations were entirely misguided. And just over a year after the disappearance of Dannette and Jeanette, the investigation came to a halt. The girls' family were informed in 1991 that there was no way of them forcing the girls to return home, as the authorities were still acting under the assumption that the pair had simply been runaways. But they were told that the case itself would remain open just in case there were any new developments that needed to be added. The NCMEC records state that the twins' case file was only kept open until the year of 1993, as at this point in time the police had actually instructed them to close the case permanently but hadn't disclosed why. There was a lot of speculation regarding why this was done though, although it is worth noting that a lot of these speculations are just based on rumours, but I thought they were worth including. It just seemed to strike a lot of people as extremely strange that the investigators would close the file in the NCMEC records when the organisation literally deals with missing and exploited juvenile cases. It's known that the girls were never seen again, they never contacted their family, nor were their social security numbers ever used. So even if the police's theory of the girls being runaways was in fact correct, why would they close the case in the NCMEC records if there'd been no contact from the girls whatsoever? As it would turn out, the family had only learned of the girls' file being closed when they contacted the NCMEC themselves. Sadly, when they did contact the organisation, they were informed that the girls had actually been located as it stated so in their records. And just before this point, the Richmond County Sheriff's Office, who were dealing with girls' case, had merged completely with the Augusta Police Department, so they were now one entity. So when the family had contacted this newly merged department themselves inquiring about this alleged discovery of the twins, they were informed that yes, in their files too, the girls were listed as having been found. And when their mother had continued to ask the individual at the department for more information, she was told to go and ask their mother where they are. But she, of course, had no clue. When she dug a little bit further, she came to learn that the police had been under the impression that the twins had been placed into foster care and were ultimately adopted by another family. But this was something that was virtually impossible, considering the fact that Child Protective Services have plenty of rules in place to avoid situations like this. Their mother had never been contacted by CPS, nor has she ever had any of her children taken away from her. In addition to this, it seemed extremely unlikely that if CPS were to take some of Louise's children away from her, they wouldn't just take the twins, they would take all of them. It was considered that the police may have possibly gotten confused at the time, as two distant relatives in the family had been placed into foster care and they had also shared the same surname, MILLBROOK. So is it possible that the investigating detectives had seen two children with the surname appear in his system and assume the case had been solved? Yes, it is possible, but is it likely that someone could make such a drastic mistake? It was later discovered, though, that there may have been something else occurring in the investigation. The juvenile detective that had been in charge of the investigation for those first few months had allegedly informed a detective involved in the case at the time that he had actually seen the twins in person, as he'd managed to track them down himself, and they told him that they were trying to travel to Texas. So this juvenile detective has since passed away, so there are a lot of unanswered questions regarding this, but I just thought it was a point that was definitely worth including in the video. This detective that was approached regarding this information had allegedly at one point shared his own beliefs on the case based on how his investigation had been going, and it wasn't entirely different from the belief of this juvenile detective. So the juvenile detective had claimed that he was under the impression that the two girls had chosen to run away and start a brand new life, all based on the impressions that he'd gotten from the enquiries that he made at Lucy Laney High School, namely with sort of staff and administrators. And the other detective's own belief had been that one of the two girls had suddenly fallen pregnant, and this is the reasoning behind why the two girls decided to run away from home. But this particular point of one of the girls being pregnant doesn't appear to be backed up by any evidence in particular, especially since neither of the girls had a boyfriend at the time and none of their friends or relatives had ever been given an impression of such. Their family also later shared their doubt that the girls would feel the need to run away if one of them had fallen pregnant, as the older sister of theirs that they'd visited on the night of their disappearance had her child while she was still a teenager, and there had been no issues in the family relating to this. Despite these theories appearing to be solely based on rumours and unsubstantiated claims, the case was nonetheless closed, not only in the police department's records, but also in the NCMEC system. What really seems to baffle me, and I think a lot of others about this case, is the fact that after the two girls went missing, there was literally no information relating to the case. There were no sightings, no suspects, no leads, no updates whatsoever. And I just don't understand how so many mistakes, drastic mistakes at that, could be made by the police department, but also just how two 15-year-old girls can simply disappear with there being absolutely no known details. The investigation was eventually reopened in the year of 2013, 23 years after the girls went missing, but it appears that nothing yet has come of this. And Dannette and Jeanette's younger sister Shanta has continued to share their story and is still out there fighting for answers. So that is where I'm going to end today's case. As always, please do let me know your thoughts down below. If you have any theories or anything that you've maybe read online or something that you've come up with yourself, please feel free to leave them below. I love watching your guys' discussions on each of these cases. And I think it goes without me saying, but one day I genuinely do hope that Dannette and Jeanette's family can actually receive some closure and some answers in what happened to the two girls. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you found this interesting, and I will see you guys tomorrow for another video. Thanks for watching. Bye.